The night was meant to be magical, yet her trembling voice broke through the soft glow of the candlelight. With eyes cast downward and hands nervously clutching her dress, she whispered, "I don't deserve this date." She had been hurt too many times, convinced she was unworthy of love, of happiness, of someone truly seeing her. But what he said next silenced the storm of doubt that had lived in her heart for years. His reply didn't just surprise her, it changed everything. The restaurant glowed softly with golden light, the hum of gentle laughter and the clinking of glasses weaving a backdrop that should have felt perfect. But for her, perfection was something she never believed belonged to her. She sat across from him, her heart racing in ways she could not explain, her fingers nervously brushing over the rim of the glass of water she hadn't touched. She could feel the weight of her insecurities pressing down on her chest like invisible chains. He had looked at her all evening with a warmth she wasn't used to, a steadiness that made her wonder if he was seeing the same flawed woman she saw every morning in the mirror. When she finally spoke, her words came out in a whisper that carried the heaviness of years of self-doubt. "I don't deserve this date." For a moment, silence hung between them, and she regretted saying it aloud. Memories rushed through her mind like shadows, being told she wasn't enough, being abandoned when she tried to love with all her heart, carrying the scars of people who had promised forever but left her bleeding instead. She thought of the times she had stood in front of the mirror trying to fix her hair, her smile, her posture, anything that could make her seem worthy of someone's affection. And still, nothing had stopped people from walking away. So she had built walls, high and thick, and decided that love was not meant for her. This date was an exception, a mistake almost, a night she thought she would endure but not embrace. She hadn't expected him to notice her, let alone ask her to dinner. The very fact that she was sitting there, with candles flickering and music playing softly, felt unreal. That's why she blurted it out, convinced she needed to end the illusion before it turned into another disappointment. He leaned back, his eyes fixed on her, not with pity, not with annoyance, but with a kind of intensity that made her want to hide and yet made her feel strangely safe. She expected him to laugh, to dismiss her words, or to change the subject and save them both from the awkwardness. Instead, he reached across the table slowly, his hand pausing halfway as if asking permission before he finally let his fingers rest gently near hers. His voice, when it came, was steady, almost tender. "Do you really think you don't deserve this?" he asked. She couldn't meet his gaze, so she nodded, a small, defeated gesture. He didn't let go. "You deserve more than this date," he said softly. "You deserve someone who sees everything you're afraid to show and still chooses you. You deserve to know that none of those scars define your worth." Her breath caught in her throat. No one had ever said that to her. People had told her to be stronger, to move on, to forget, but no one had ever acknowledged the quiet battle she fought every day. Her eyes burned, and she blinked quickly, embarrassed at the tears that threatened to fall. He smiled faintly, not the kind of smile that tried to cheer her up, but one that told her he understood. He went on, his words breaking through the silence she had lived in for so long. "I asked you out tonight because I see someone who carries herself with grace even when she doesn't believe it. I see someone who has been through storms but still stands tall. You think you're undeserving, but maybe that's because no one ever stayed long enough to show you that you are." Every word felt like it was chipping away at the wall she had built around herself. She wanted to believe him, but the years of rejection whispered louder in her mind. "But what if I'm not who you think I am?" she asked quietly, her voice trembling. "What if I disappoint you?" His eyes softened, and he didn't hesitate before replying. "Then I'll be disappointed. That's part of being human. But I won't stop seeing you. I didn't come here expecting perfection. I came here because I wanted to know the real you, the one who doesn't have to pretend, the one who doubts, the one who's afraid. That's the you I want to know." Something in her broke then, but it wasn't the kind of breaking that left her shattered. It was the kind that loosened chains, the kind that allowed light to seep into a room that had been dark for far too long. She realized in that moment how much of her life she had spent shrinking herself, convincing herself she was unworthy of love, when maybe the truth was that the wrong people had simply failed to see her. His words weren't a grand declaration, not the kind of romance she had read in novels, but they felt more real than anything she had ever heard. And that reality was terrifying and beautiful all at once. The rest of the evening unfolded differently after that. The food on the table, which she had hardly touched before, began to taste like something she could enjoy. The music in the background wasn't just noise anymore, it was a melody she could let herself sway to. She found herself laughing, really laughing, not the polite chuckle she gave to fill silences, but the kind that came from somewhere deep within. He listened to her, not just to her words but to the pauses between them, to the stories she almost didn't tell but finally let slip because his presence made them easier to share. And every time she faltered, thinking she had said too much or revealed too much, his eyes reassured her that he wasn't going anywhere. Hours slipped by unnoticed. For the first time in years, she wasn't counting the minutes until she could retreat back into her solitude. Instead, she found herself hoping the night would never end. She realized then that maybe this wasn't about deserving or not deserving. Maybe love, real love, wasn't something you earned like a prize or something you lost like a punishment. Maybe it was simply about being seen and chosen, even in your most fragile moments. His reply had done more than shock her. It had planted a seed of belief that she might, after all, be worthy of the kind of love she had always been too afraid to hope for. When they finally stepped out into the cool night air, she felt lighter. The city lights sparkled, and for once, she didn't feel small against their brilliance. He walked beside her, not too close to overwhelm her, but close enough that she felt his presence steadying her steps. As they paused by the street, he looked at her with that same unwavering gaze and said quietly, "Tonight wasn't about proving anything. It was about reminding you that you never have to earn the right to be cared for. You already are enough." The words she had spoken still lingered in the air like fragile glass that might shatter with the slightest touch. "I don't deserve this date." She hadn't meant for them to escape her lips, but the fear of being seen too closely, of being unmasked, had always been stronger than her ability to pretend. She braced herself for his silence, or worse, for the polite smile that usually meant someone was finding a way to end the evening early. Instead, his reply had come like a hand reaching into the darkness she had lived in for so long. His voice was calm, steady, carrying no trace of mockery. "You deserve more than this date. You deserve to be seen for who you truly are." She froze, her chest tightening as the words sank into places she had carefully locked away. The walls she had built around herself were thick, constructed brick by brick from years of pain, humiliation, and abandonment. Yet somehow, with a few simple sentences, he had slipped through a crack she didn't realize was there. She wanted to laugh it off, to brush away his kindness before it unsettled her too deeply, but when she looked into his eyes, she saw no pity, no agenda, only sincerity. That terrified her more than cruelty ever could, because cruelty was familiar, but kindness demanded she believe in something greater than her scars. Her mind was a battlefield. On one side stood the echoes of her past, voices that had told her she was too much, too little, too flawed to be loved. On the other stood his words, soft yet unshakable, insisting that she was worthy, that she was enough. The voices of the past screamed louder, but his eyes, steady and unwavering, whispered louder still. And somehow, those whispers reached her. She found herself remembering the times she had been broken down piece by piece. The boyfriend who told her she wasn't beautiful enough to bring home to his family. The friend who disappeared when her struggles became too heavy to listen to. The relatives who compared her to others as though her worth could be measured on a scale of accomplishments. Each wound had left a scar, and together they had convinced her that love was not something she was meant to have. But now, sitting across from him, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, she had been wrong all along. He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice as if he didn't want anyone else in the world to overhear what he was saying. "You've been told lies for so long that they've become louder than the truth. But let me tell you something, none of those lies get to decide who you are. You do, and the woman I see in front of me isn't broken. She's stronger than she realizes." The tenderness in his tone made her chest ache. She had grown used to proving herself, to pretending she was fine even when she wasn't. But here he was, telling her she didn't need to be perfect, that even her cracks were part of her beauty. Tears burned at the corners of her eyes, and for the first time in a long while, she didn't force them back. One slipped down her cheek, and she quickly wiped it away, embarrassed. He noticed, of course, but instead of drawing attention to it, he simply reached for his glass, giving her the space to breathe. It was such a small gesture, but it told her he understood that healing didn't come from grand declarations but from the quiet presence of someone who stayed. As the evening continued, she felt herself unraveling in ways she had never allowed before. She told him about the time she almost gave up on love entirely, how she had sworn never to go on another date again after being humiliated by someone who had pretended to care. She confessed the shame she carried, the feeling that she wasn't enough for anyone to choose. Her voice shook with every revelation, but each time she glanced up, he was still there, listening, not interrupting, not dismissing. His silence wasn't empty, it was full, weighted with the kind of attention that told her words mattered. And then, when she finally paused, exhausted by her own honesty, he spoke. "You've been surviving for so long that you've forgotten how to live. But you don't have to fight every battle alone anymore. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let someone stand beside you." Those words pierced through her defenses like sunlight breaking through clouds. She had never considered that letting someone close wasn't weakness, but courage. To allow another person to see her fears, her doubts, her jagged edges, that was terrifying, but maybe it was also the very thing she had been longing for without admitting it. His reply wasn't just comforting, it was transformative, planting seeds of hope in soil she thought was barren. She studied him quietly as he spoke of his own past, his own wounds that weren't visible on the surface. He told her about moments when he felt like giving up, when he thought he wasn't enough, when the world seemed too heavy to carry. Hearing that he, too, had struggled made her feel less alone. He wasn't speaking from a pedestal, he was speaking from experience, from a place of empathy. And suddenly, she realized that healing wasn't about finding someone to fix her, it was about finding someone willing to walk the path with her. The laughter that followed between them wasn't forced, it bubbled up naturally, like water finally flowing after being blocked for too long. She noticed the way he looked at her, not as though she was fragile, but as though she was valuable. Every smile, every word, every glance chipped away at the armor she had carried for years, until she could finally breathe a little easier. The wounds inside her didn't disappear that night, but they began to soften, to ache less sharply, because for the first time, she wasn't carrying them alone. When they stepped outside, the night air wrapped around them, cool and refreshing. She felt different somehow, lighter, though nothing about her past had changed. What had changed was the way she saw herself through his eyes. For years, she had defined herself by her scars, but tonight, he had shown her that those scars were proof of survival, not symbols of unworthiness. They walked slowly, the city alive around them with lights and sounds, but for her, the world seemed quieter, calmer. She realized she was no longer bracing for disappointment, no longer waiting for him to leave. Instead, she felt a flicker of trust, fragile but real. And that flicker was enough. His reply had shocked her, yes, but more than that, it had begun the process of healing wounds she thought would never close. As they reached the corner where they would part ways, he paused and turned to her. "I don't know where this will lead," he said honestly, "but I do know one thing. You don't have to earn the right to be loved. You already deserve it, simply because you exist." Her breath hitched, and for a moment she couldn't find the words to respond. All she could do was nod, because anything more would have broken the delicate thread of emotion that tied her heart to his in that instant. And as she walked away, she felt a warmth spreading through her chest, a warmth that told her she was no longer the woman who whispered she didn't deserve this. She was someone beginning to believe that maybe, just maybe, she always had.